Love, to most people, is about addition. Add two lives together. Add warmth, trust, and safety. Add memories, laughter, and belonging. But for the avoidant, love doesn't start as addition. It starts as subtraction, because every step closer feels like something is being taken away. Their time, their freedom, their air to breathe, their sense of safety. So instead of counting closeness as love, they count closeness as risk. And this is where the emotional mathematics begins. A quiet, hidden equation they carry into every relationship. One that no one else can see, but that rules everything. The first equation, love as loss. For the avoidant, closeness doesn't equal comfort. It equals danger. And so, in their private arithmetic, love becomes loss. Every hug that lingers too long, it costs them freedom. Every text that expects a reply, it costs them space. Every question about their feelings, it costs them control. You see, when you grew up with love that hurt, or with love that was absent, your nervous system doesn't record closeness as warmth. It records closeness as the moment the pain began. So instead of running toward love, the avoidant begins calculating. How much will this cost me? How soon before I lose myself? How long before I'm trapped? It's not because they don't care. It's because care feels expensive, and intimacy feels like a debt they'll never be able to pay back. They don't sit down with pen and paper, but in their mind, every moment of intimacy runs through a hidden formula. Affection equals pressure. Commitment equals entrapment. Dependence equals suffocation. This equation was written long ago, in a childhood where their needs weren't safe. Maybe every time they reached for comfort, they were shamed. Maybe every time they cried, no one came. Maybe the people they trusted most were the very ones who disappeared or hurt them when they were most open. So now, as adults, the avoidant doesn't measure love in gifts, effort, or time. They measure it in risk. How much of myself will I lose if I let you in? How much will it hurt when this ends? How much pressure will I suffocate under if I let this continue? Imagine this. You hold them close, thinking they'll feel safe in your arms. But instead, their nervous system is whispering. This is how it starts. This is the moment where I'll be asked for more. This is where I'll lose myself. So they push away, not because you did anything wrong, not because they don't love you, but because their math told them. Closeness has already tipped into loss. And here's the paradox. They crave connection. They ache for closeness. But their emotional mathematics always tilts the scale against it. Because when safety has never lived in intimacy, intimacy feels like danger. To them, the safest love is the one held at a distance. So while you're adding trust, adding affection, adding care, they are subtracting freedom, subtracting safety, subtracting self. And when the numbers no longer add up, they run, not because they don't feel, but because feeling comes with a cost. They were trained to believe they can't afford. This is the first equation of the avoidant. Love equals loss. Closeness equals risk. Intimacy equals danger. It's not logical, but it is deeply lived, because their body has rehearsed it for years. And until that equation is rewritten, every embrace, every call, every gesture of love feels less like gain and more like something slipping away. And this is why the avoidance love feels so contradictory. They can hold you one moment and withdraw the next. They can laugh with you and then retreat into silence. They can crave you, but push you away when you give yourself fully. It's not random. It's not heartless. It's mathematics, emotional mathematics. And it's the first hidden truth about how the avoidant counts closeness, not as a gift, but as a risk they must survive. The second equation, intimacy as debt. If the first equation is this, closeness equals risk, then the second equation is even heavier. Intimacy equals debt. Because to the avoidant, love never feels free. It feels like a bill waiting to arrive. When you reach out with tenderness, they don't just feel the warmth of your touch. They feel the weight of what they now owe you. When you show up for them in a moment of need, they don't just feel supported. They feel the pressure of how they'll ever repay you. When you pour your heart into them, they don't just feel loved. They feel trapped inside an obligation, an invisible contract they never signed, but one they believe they must now honor. This belief is not random. It comes from a childhood where love was rarely given freely. Maybe their parents' affection came with strings. Be good, and you'll be hugged. Achieve, and you'll be praised. Stay quiet, and you'll be accepted. Or maybe affection never came at all. So the little scraps they received felt like survival itself, but always demanded silence, obedience, or invisibility. So, deep inside, the avoidant learns. Love is not a gift. Love is a transaction, and intimacy always has a price. Now imagine being in a relationship with this hidden arithmetic. You say, I miss you. To you, it's an expression of love. To them, it's a reminder. You owe me your presence. You ask, how are you feeling? To you, it's care. To them, it's a demand. You owe me your inner world. You lean on them when you're hurting. To you, it's trust. To them, it's a silent debt they must now carry, a burden that feels heavier than their own pain. And so, instead of intimacy feeling soft and safe, it feels sharp and costly. Every moment of connection is added to a silent balance sheet in their mind. You gave them comfort. Now they owe comfort back. You gave them affection. Now they owe affection back. You gave them your whole heart. Now they owe something they don't know how to give, their whole heart in return. And here's the cruelest part. Because they never learned how to give love freely, they always feel they're already in debt. Debt creates pressure. Pressure creates panic. And panic creates distance. So when they retreat after moments of closeness, it's not because the closeness was empty. It's because the closeness felt expensive. Too expensive for someone who doesn't believe they can ever repay it. Let's pause here. Imagine love is like a shared meal. For most people, it feels simple. You give, you receive, you enjoy. But for the avoidant, it's like being invited to dinner and realizing they forgot their wallet. Every bite tastes like guilt. Every smile across the table feels like a weight. Every gesture of kindness is translated as, you owe me now. So what do? They decline the meal. They pull back. They'd rather go hungry than sit in the unbearable feeling of debt. This is why, to the avoidant, distance feels safer than intimacy. Distance costs nothing. No expectations. No bills to pay. No emotional contracts to sign. But closeness? Closeness feels like credit they'll never be able to repay. And so they withdraw, not because they don't care, but because care feels like a price tag they can't afford to carry. But here's the deeper truth. You never asked them to repay you. You never demanded their love as a debt. The debt lives inside them, in the nervous system that learned long ago that nothing came free, that every smile had a condition, that every hug had a cost, that every moment of warmth was borrowed against future pain. And so even when you love them without strings, they still tie strings around themselves. This is why intimacy with an avoidant so often feels like you're walking into an invisible storm. You're giving love as a gift. They're receiving it as a loan. You're building connection. They're counting what it will cost. You're saying, I love you. They're hearing, you now owe me something in return. And so, Their body chooses what feels like the only escape. Distance. Distance clears the balance sheet. Distance cancels the bill. Distance says, if I leave before I owe too much, I can still breathe. But this is also why avoidants often circle back. Because when the distance grows, they suddenly feel the ache of what they've lost. And the cycle begins again. Come close. Feel debt. Pull away. Miss connection. Return. Not because they don't love, but because their emotional mathematics never lets them believe that love can be free. So here is the second truth of the avoidance equations. Intimacy equals debt. Closeness equals obligation. Love equals transaction. Until this belief is unlearned, every act of affection will feel heavy. Every gesture of care will feel loaded. Every I love you will echo with I owe you. And the avoidant will keep running, not from love itself, but from the cost they think it carries. The third equation, vulnerability as weakness. If the first equation is closeness equals risk, and the second is intimacy equals debt, then the third is perhaps the most defining. Vulnerability equals weakness, because to the avoidant, to be seen is to be exposed. To be known is to be in danger. To be open is to hand someone the sharpest knife and then trust they won't use it. You ask them to share their fears. To you, it's bonding. To them, it's an opening where harm can slip in. You ask them to tell you about their childhood. To you, it's intimacy. To them, it's the door to memories that feel unbearable and the fear that once spoken. Those stories will be used against them. You ask them to let you in. To you, it's closeness. To them, it's weakness, a soft underbelly they've spent their whole life protecting. This belief comes from survival. As children, when they were small, the people who were supposed to keep them safe were often the very people who hurt them. Maybe they tried once, crying out, reaching for comfort, and instead of being met with warmth, they were met with coldness, or anger, or punishment. Maybe they shared something tender, only to have it mocked. Maybe they revealed their true feelings, only to learn that feelings were too heavy for anyone to carry. So the lesson carved itself into their bones. Do not reveal. Do not trust. Do not expose. Because exposure is weakness, and weakness is dangerous. And so, as adults, their nervous system treats vulnerability like fire. The very thing that could warm them is also the thing that could burn them. So they avoid it, or shut it down, or change the subject, or laugh it off, not because they don't want to share, but because sharing feels like suicide to the body. Think of it this way. For you, love may feel like building a bridge. Each truth shared is a plank laid down. Each fear spoken is a step closer. For them, every plank feels like one less shield. Every step feels like one more way. They can be targeted. So while you're building, they're calculating. How do I keep myself safe while standing in the open? And often, their only answer is retreat. This is why you may notice that the closer you try to get, the colder they become. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they feel too much. It's not that they don't care. It's that caring feels like exposure. It's not that they don't want love. It's that love requires a nakedness they never believed they could survive. So vulnerability equals weakness, and weakness equals danger, and danger equals retreat. That is their math, their nervous system's equation, their body's truth, even when their mind wishes it weren't. Let's pause and imagine their world for a moment. You say, tell me what's really going on. You mean, I want to understand you. They hear, give me the weapons that could destroy you. You say, it's safe to cry with me. You mean, I'll hold you. They hear, if I cry, you'll see I'm weak. And if you see I'm weak, you'll use it against me. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. You say, I love you. You mean, I choose you. They hear, if I let myself believe this, and you leave, I will shatter, and I cannot survive shattering again. This is the silent battlefield in their body. Every invitation to open feels like a summons to war. Every act of softness feels like a call to arms. Every gesture of love feels like the beginning of betrayal, not because you're betraying them, but because their nervous system still lives in the past, where love and harm were often delivered by the same hands. And so, to survive, they stay armored. The armor may look like detachment, like jokes, like avoidance, like being fine all the time. But under that armor isn't someone cold. It's someone terrified that if they ever take it off, they won't make it out alive. Here's the paradox. The thing they most want, real connection, deep intimacy, safe love, is locked behind the very wall they built to protect themselves. The armor saves them from imagined danger, but the armor also keeps out the very safety they long for. And so they live in this loop, yearning for closeness, fearing exposure, longing for love, distrusting it when it arrives, wanting to be seen, and hiding the moment someone looks too closely. It's exhausting, it's painful, and yet to them, it feels safer than the alternative. Because here's their math. If I stay armored, I may be lonely, but at least I'm safe. If I open up, I may be loved, but I may also be destroyed. And when survival is the priority, loneliness feels like the safer cost. But here's what changes everything. When an avoidant finally learns that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength, their whole arithmetic collapses. When they learn that sharing their truth does not mean certain destruction, but can mean certain connection, their body begins to soften. When they experience someone who holds their openness gently, without judgment, without punishment, without betrayal, the armor loosens, and they begin to rewrite the equation. But that rewriting takes time, because to unlearn this belief is not an intellectual task. It's not enough to know, logically, that vulnerability can be safe. The nervous system must experience it over and over again until safety feels real, until openness doesn't trigger alarms, until closeness is no longer calculated as risk. So here is the third truth of the avoidance emotional mathematics. Vulnerability equals weakness, and therefore, vulnerability must be avoided until they learn, through love, through healing, through safety repeated again and again, that vulnerability isn't the doorway to destruction, but the only doorway to real love. If vulnerability equals weakness, then independence equals safety. This is the next line in the avoidance hidden equation. Because to them, depending on someone else, feels like building a house on sand. It may look steady today, it may feel solid right now, but they know storms come. And when the waves rise, the house collapses, and they are left in ruins. So they decide, better not to build at all, better to carry their own shelter, better to need no one. You may see this in small ways. They won't ask for help, even when they're drowning. They downplay their pain. Even when they're hurting, they insist they're fine, even when their eyes betray otherwise. It looks like pride. It looks like arrogance. But at its core, it's terror, because the moment they lean, they fear the ground will give way, and they will fall farther than ever before. Independence, then, isn't just a preference. It isn't just a lifestyle choice. It's their shield, their fortress, their air supply. It keeps them upright in a world where trust once failed them. It keeps them safe in a body that remembers being dropped. And so they cling to it, not lightly, but desperately. Think of how this plays out in relationships. You want to share the weight. They want to carry it alone. You want to merge lives. They want to keep things separate. You want to call them your home. They want to keep one foot out the door, just in case. Not because they don't care, not because they don't love you, but because safety, to them, means not needing you. Because if they don't need you, they can't be destroyed when you leave. And this is the paradox. The very thing that makes love beautiful is the very thing they're most afraid of. Mutual dependence, the ability to rest in another's arms, the surrender of carrying everything alone. What feels natural to you feels threatening to them. What feels like intimacy to you feels like entrapment to them. What feels like home to you feels like risk to them. It's why they sometimes look happiest when they're with strangers or in situations where no one relies on them. And they rely on no one because in those moments, their nervous system is quiet. There are no debts, no dangers, no risks of betrayal, just the sweet relief of standing alone. But here's the cost. Standing alone means standing outside. It means watching closeness from a distance. It means yearning for warmth, but refusing to step near the fire. It means telling themselves, I don't need this, while every part of their being aches for it. So independence feels like safety, but it's also their cage. They get to avoid the danger of closeness, but they also avoid the medicine of closeness. They get to protect themselves from pain, but they also protect themselves from healing. And they end up here, free, but lonely, safe, but starved. Imagine it this way. Their independence is like a fortress. High walls, thick stone, no gates. Inside, they are safe. No one can hurt them. But inside, they are also alone. No one can love them. And to them, that feels like the better deal. Because they believe loneliness is survivable. But heartbreak is not. This is why so many avoidants push away those who care for them. It's not because they don't want love. It's because they want survival more. It's not because they don't value intimacy. It's because they value safety more. And in their math, safety is found in self-reliance. Safety is found in not needing. Safety is found in keeping distance. But here's the truth they don't know yet. Independence doesn't have to be lost. In order to love, self-reliance doesn't have to vanish. In order to depend on someone, safety doesn't have to be sacrificed. In order to be close, because healthy love doesn't erase independence, it strengthens it. Healthy intimacy doesn't erase freedom, it makes freedom safer. Healthy partnership isn't two people fusing into one, but two whole people choosing to walk together. The avoidant hasn't learned this yet because their lessons came too early and were too harsh. They learned dependence leads to pain, needing leads to abandonment, trusting leads to betrayal. So they locked themselves in independence. They sealed the fortress, and they threw away the key. But deep down, their body still aches for someone who will prove them wrong, someone who will stand at those walls, not breaking them down violently, but patiently, gently, consistently, someone who will show them that safety and intimacy can exist together. This is where healing begins. When the avoidant finally discovers that independence doesn't vanish in love, but evolves, their equation begins to shift. When they experience that leaning on someone doesn't lead to collapse, but to deeper strength, their body begins to soften. When they learn that closeness can coexist with safety, the fortress begins to open its gates. Not all at once, not in an instant, but slowly, brick by brick, breath by breath. And here is the heart of this truth. Independence saved them, but intimacy can free them. Self-reliance kept them alive, but shared reliance can let them thrive. Standing alone kept them safe, but standing together can finally bring them home. So the fourth equation is this: independence equals safety, until they learn that real safety is not just in standing alone, but in finding someone who can stand with them without taking away their freedom. They have one last equation, the one that sits at the bottom of all the rest, the one that shapes every choice, every fear, every push and pull. It goes like this: love equals uncertainty, because to the avoidant, love is not safe ground. It is shifting sand. One moment, it feels solid. The next, it begins to crumble. One moment, your closeness feels warm. The next, it feels suffocating. One moment, your care feels like a gift. The next, it feels like a trap. And so, every time they step into love, they step onto unstable earth, never sure when it will collapse. This is why you'll see them holding back even when they want to give, withdrawing even when they want to stay, guarding themselves even when their heart is already in your hands. Because uncertainty to them isn't an idea, it's a wound. It's the memory of promises broken, the memory of comfort withdrawn, the memory of closeness that turned into abandonment. To you, uncertainty is part of life. You accept that nothing is guaranteed, that love is a risk worth taking. To them, uncertainty is a signal, danger ahead. To you, love is a leap. To them, love is a cliff. Think of how this shows up. You say, "I'll always be here." They hear, "Until you're not." You say, "You can trust me." They hear, "Until you change." You say, "I won't hurt you." They hear, "You just don't know it yet." Every word of reassurance meets the math of their nervous system, and their nervous system is always calculating the risk. It's not that they don't believe you, it's that they can't, because their body remembers another story, a story of inconsistency, a story of closeness that vanished, a story of love that was unsafe. So when you speak love, their heart wants to receive it, but their body whispers, "Don't trust it." And so, love becomes a battlefield inside them, part of them leaning forward, part of them pulling back, part of them aching for your arms, part of them running from your touch, part of them hoping you'll stay, part of them preparing for the moment you won't. This is not indecision. It is survival, because their nervous system will always choose safety over connection, even when connection is the one thing they want most. Here is the cruel paradox. The avoidant longs for love, but when love comes, they can't rest in it, because to rest is to risk, and risk feels like danger. So they hover, half in, half out, wanting, but fearing, holding on, but pushing away. And you, on the other side, feel the whiplash, the confusion, the ache of being wanted and rejected, all at once. But beneath this struggle, something important is hiding. If love feels like uncertainty to them, it means they are not numb. It means they are not indifferent. It means they care, so much that it scares them. Indifference doesn't run. Indifference doesn't hide. Indifference doesn't calculate risk. Only someone who cares. Is this torn? Only someone who desires closeness. Is this afraid of it? So the final equation isn't just fear. It's also longing. Love equals uncertainty. Yes, but also love equals hope. Hope that maybe, this time, things will be different. Hope that maybe you won't walk away. Hope that maybe their nervous system is wrong about you. Hope that maybe, for once, love could mean safety too. And this is where transformation becomes possible. When the avoidant begins to test that hope, when they risk just a little more, when they let you see behind the wall. for a brief moment. It may come in the smallest ways. A late-night confession. They regret the moment it leaves their lips. A tear they quickly wipe away. Before you notice, a moment they reach for your hand and then pull back. But you felt it. The desire was there. Every small crack in the armor is a sign of hope, a sign that the equation is beginning to shift. Love is still uncertain, but it is no longer just danger. It is also possibility. And possibility is the first breath of healing. Here's what this means for you. When you love someone avoidant, you are not loving someone cold. You are loving someone terrified. When you love someone avoidant, you are not fighting indifference. You are fighting fear. When you love someone avoidant, you are not unwanted. You are deeply wanted. So much that your closeness sets off every alarm inside them. So if you felt pushed away, if you've wondered why they run, remember this. Their running is not the absence of love. It is the shape of their fear. Their silence is not proof of indifference. It is the sound of their survival. Their withdrawal is not rejection. It is the only math they know. Closeness equals risk. But math can be rewritten. Equations can change. Stories can be retold. Nervous systems can learn new rhythms. The avoidant may not know this yet, but you do. And perhaps, by staying curious, by holding compassion, by protecting your own heart while seeing theirs, you can be the proof that shifts their equation. Because love is not a cliff. It is not unstable ground. It is not the chaos they remember. Love, in its healthiest form, is a place where both freedom and closeness live, where both independence and intimacy breathe, where both safety and vulnerability can coexist. The avoidance math is not the final truth. It is only the survival code they were forced to live by, but survival math can evolve into living math. And living math sounds like this. Closeness equals strength. Intimacy equals safety. Love equals home. And if you've ever loved an avoidant, this is the gift you give them. A glimpse of that new equation. Even if they run, even if they struggle, even if they resist, your presence whispers to them what their past never could. That love doesn't have to destroy. That safety and closeness can belong together. That uncertainty isn't the whole story. And that one day, their math can finally change.